Folks, there is nothing like a little late night college football talk, especially to open up the weekend, kick off the weekend, and week 5 of college football. Welcome into the voice of college football. Before we get to the scores, before we get to the calls and the analysis, I made the mistake tonight. So I'm sure your YouTube works much like mine does. I believe so. Yeah, that would make sense, right? So anytime I'm working on YouTube, which this is where I do my work, it is constantly suggesting videos and live streams and so forth. So I see that our guy, John Kennedy from Always Irish, is on tonight with a live call-in show. I never, meaning I've done it a couple times in my life. So when I say never, not literally never, but next to never, maybe once a year, I will dive into somebody else's show and listen to the calls for 30 seconds to a minute and see some comments and so forth. So knowing how Notre Dame fans have been acting for the past week, some Notre Dame fans have been acting on social media for the past week, I dove into the chat there. And as soon as I did, there were a number of people that recognized and acknowledged my presence there. And John's a great guy. We love John. And he does a tremendous job there at Always Irish. He's passionate. He loves his Notre Dame football team, of course. And so I ended up doing something that I have never done before. May not do it again, but I called in to the show. So you can check it out. It's on the Always Irish channel. We'll give John some pub. And I don't know at what point in the show I called, so you may have to kind of skim through. And so because John joined us before the Ohio State Notre Dame game at some point when we did a preview live show with Nathan Erbach and with John. And John let me know that there are all sorts of folks on his Notre Dame channel that said either that are familiar with me and my work and join us here on a regular basis that are saying, Mark is saying this, and that about Notre Dame. And then some other people, since a lot of those comments by me have been clipped and placed on social media, people that are not aware. Can you imagine? Again, this soaks in every so often. You know, there are folks out there that don't know that we are here talking college football with all of you every day. Can you imagine that life? It must be a miserable one. So anyway, folks out there not knowing that we're here, the voice of college football, and but have discovered, you know, some of my comments that on the surface, if edited correctly, if edited with an agenda in mind, would be taken out of context, of course. And we know that the news media doesn't do this. The mainstream news media, we know that they would never stoop to this level to actually take comments out of context and edit in such a way to take maybe an hour-long speech and clip off 14 seconds and say, this is what this person said about this topic. We know that that would just never happen. I'm almost ashamed I actually worked in that field on the journalistic side. I actually called myself a journalist, but yeah, I cut it straight just like I do here. Anyway, so I jumped on the show to point out a few things. Number one, to point out that Notre Dame fans are welcome here at the Voice of College Football, and we do have our Notre Dame fans that join the chat. And as I find out every day that there are people out there that root for particular teams that we really don't know are watching our videos and taking part in the live streams, because obviously only a certain amount of people call into the show or leave comments in the chat. There's a lot of people that lurk out there, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. So I'm sure we have more Notre Dame fans here than meets the eye. And many of them were pissed off at me. They're pissed off about losing a game that they should have won. So I understand that. So I am trying to be lenient considering the level of frustration and just anger and bitterness that must just be simmering or exploding, because this is a fan base that has not really won a meaningful football game in a long, long time, not defeated an elite team since. And so I get it. I get it. We all love our football. I have been at that passionate level at other times in my life. So I get it. I get it. So I've been very lenient, very understanding. And so I called in to say, John, first of all, Notre Dame played an outstanding game. Notre Dame fans have nothing to be ashamed of. And I have no issue with any Notre Dame fan saying, you know what, I watched that game and I think we're the better football team. I have no issue with that whatsoever. When the game is that close, either team can walk away from that game and their fan base and say, you know what, I think we're the better team. Ohio State fans have every right. Of course, they won the game. They won it on the road. And in a number of areas, it's easy to see where, hey, with a quarterback starting his fourth game, they may actually be onto something here. They may be propelling toward the future as opposed to a quarterback starting his 50th game, that Ohio State may just be breaking through here. So Ohio State fans, of course, winning the game can say we're the better team, especially since you've been the better team every year going back to when I was just a lad, just like in my high school and college days. That was a long time ago, folks. But I have no issue with Notre Dame fans who claim to be the better team because it was that close. Okay. But I told John, I said, Notre Dame still has a lot to play for. They're an outstanding football team, but I want to clarify a few things. One thing, let's clarify this. I said there have basically been two Notre Dame fans' arguments that have annoyed me for the last 6 or 7 months, and I've been extremely, excruciatingly patient. I've had the patience of Job with some of these morons. Point number one being that many of them have guaranteed a win. I don't even know what that means. What happens when you guarantee a win and the team doesn't win? What happens? What's the repercussion? Do we hold you accountable? What do we do? Tar and feather you? Take away your income for a year? What is the accountability factor there? So there is none. So guaranteeing wins, that's just dumb. To guarantee a win against anybody is stupid, but you know, it's free speech. You can say whatever you want, but it's just moronic. So, and a lot of those people will determine that later in life at some point. We all grow up and become a little bit wiser, and I still have some growing up to do at times. So that was one thing, this guaranteed win. And I said, I have absolutely no issue with the Notre Dame fan who came into this game saying, you know what? We've upgraded at quarterback. They've got a first-time starter at quarterback. We played them well last year. We've got a better coach. We've got all this mojo going. We played a decent NC State team a couple weeks ago, and we blew them out and added up all these different factors, and we're hopeful and optimistic that they would win that game. I have no issue with that. None whatsoever. Be hopeful, be optimistic, make an argument, but this, I guarantee it. Okay. The other thing that has annoyed me for 7 months have been the Notre Dame fans that have actually said that the Notre Dame program is on the same level as Ohio State. This leads me to believe that the condition of math, understanding the ability to add and subtract and divide, is at an all-time low in this country, because simple math leads you to the conclusion that these programs are not on the same level. Now, I understand and have no issue with the Notre Dame fan who would come into this season and say, you know what? We haven't been on that level for 30 years. But I believe we're there now. And we're going to show it in this game. And maybe to a certain extent, they did. Maybe they are on the same level this season. And I believe because Marcus Freeman's going to upgrade the recruiting and has over Brian Kelly, and because of all these reasons that we won't go into right now, I have no issue with the Notre Dame fan that believes that Notre Dame is on the same level as Ohio State right now. But any Notre Dame fan that would say that we've been on the same level, well, that's utterly pathetic and ridiculous. I will give you just one stat of many. We could sit here all night, and it's not even close. 14 New Year's Six bowl wins, 0. 14-0. Come on. It's just not even. Notre Dame's had a better record than Ohio State in the last 30 years. Twice in 30 years. Twice. I think teams like Iowa have had a better record more times than that over Ohio State in the last 30 years. My last point before we start taking some calls, and we're going to run down the scores here real quick too, is that I did a video comparing Notre Dame to the Big Ten because during the realignment session and everything going on this spring and summer, we do what we do here at the Voice of College Football. We analyze the sport better than anyone. So what I was doing was I was taking teams that were entering new conferences or were proposed to go possibly to new conferences, Notre Dame to the Big Ten. Not saying it's going to happen, just saying, hey, let's look at this. Let's analyze what this has been, let's say, in the last 20 years, since 2000, what it looks like right now, and then what it would, the potential of it looking like in the future if Notre Dame was in the Big Ten. Notre Dame basically has roughly the same record since 2000 as Iowa. That's not my opinion. That's a fact. They roughly have, I didn't say exactly, they're within 8 games in 23 seasons. They basically have a winning percentage that's like 2 or 3 points higher. It's basically the same. So I made the statement, they have, let's understand our verbs, our tenses, they have had about the same program as Iowa since the year 2000. And they didn't like that. And then I said their 2022 season at 9-4 with losses to Marshall and Stanford. Let that sink in. I know it was over a year ago, but let that sink in. Just looking at 2022, they lost to Marshall and Stanford. That they roughly had the season that a typical Wisconsin or Minnesota team has. Right? Minnesota's gone 9-4 the last 2 years. 11-2 in 2019. Okay. Just that one season. That's all I was talking about. And then I said, pushing forward, looking forward, if Notre Dame continues on this trajectory, they are basically Penn State, roughly Penn State. I thought that was a compliment. And so I get on the show tonight and I called in and I go through all these points, and it was hilarious to see the comments. You would think that that would have explained some things and would have opened some eyes to some logic. And people would have thought, okay, I don't like to hear that, but that's the truth. And that's a logical. Maybe I don't agree with every single nuance of those points, but that's understandable. It's logical. But no, I'm just getting buried in the chat by some people either were already aware of me, and others listen to common sense and logic and facts. So I kind of wasted like 20 minutes of my time. We're going to stop wasting time. I made that decision a few weeks ago. I'm much briefer with people in text. I don't mess around texting these long. No. None of that anymore. There's a lot of thumbs ups. There's a lot of ha. There's a lot of that going on. If we want to have a conversation and it's worth having a conversation, we'll have a conversation. We're going to have some conversations right now as soon as we check the scoreboard. We've got, of course, BYU and Cincinnati on the field in Provo. Cougars lead 21-10. That game has just started the third quarter, 11:38 left in the third. Last I looked, I was watching Oregon State and Utah put on a passing clinic on both sides. Yes, Nate Johnson in the first half for Utah. DJ Huyangalele. It was brutal. It was brutal. And Utah was on life support. Last I saw, 21-7. And I believe we've got a final score. We've got 2.5 minutes left. Oregon State leads 21-7. They've got the ball. And earlier tonight, Louisville came back from 10 down to defeat NC State. I watched that game, kept my eye on it. Can't say I really watched it, analyzed it, like locked in. But Louisville came back. They had a late interception of Brennan Armstrong after they were down 10-0. So the Cardinals are now 5-0. All right, let's get to it. Amazon links in the description section of all the videos. Every video, it's there. Grab it, use it. All right, here we go. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. We got Jeffrey on the line. Jeffrey, how you doing?
I'm doing really good tonight. And yeah, when you mentioned the never guarantee a win, I've never in my life said that, because, yeah, that'd be like me saying, I guarantee Indiana will beat Akron. And then what happened with Indiana and Akron, yeah, that would have made me look real bad. I would never say that I guarantee a win, because you could lose. Bowling Green beat Minnesota. It happens.
I wish no harm on anyone. Of course. It's just a game. So I don't want this comment to be taken out of context, but I'm going to say it anyway. In this day and age, people may go crazy. Like, if we held a loaded gun to these people's heads and said, you're guaranteeing this game, like,
well, I would be like, no.
Well, of course not. Of course. And that's sensible. You can say all you want. I believe it. I'm confident. No issue with that.
Yeah, it's insane. It just cracks me up, though. Yeah, you just said that you weren't too locked into the Louisville-NC State game, but there was a play late in the game where you had Louisville punting the ball back to NC State, and NC State, quote unquote, ran into the punter or whatever, but it looked like he was pushed slightly. I'm not saying he was pushed slightly. Maybe he could have avoided it, but that's a play. Two things. One, I don't know if you did see that and you felt that possibly it shouldn't have been called because he was pushed maybe a little bit. But the other thing to me is, why in the world in that situation, it's not the middle of the game, but why, when you're getting the ball back, as long as you do not hit the punter or you do not go off sides, why do it? Why even go after the ball to try to block it? I don't understand that. I'm watching the game with my dad, and I'm like, why in the world did they even attempt to block it? All you have to do is just let it go. You're getting the ball. You'd have a shot. Now, Brennan Armstrong, they did get the ball back anyway, and Brennan Armstrong throws a ridiculous interception, which it was so funny because of the fact I actually, after the game, my dad was like, Brennan Armstrong, he's terrible. And I'm like, yeah, let's look at those 2021 highlights real quick. And he was like, man, I remember the Virginia-Miami game with that ball that bobbled in the air and it was caught. But my mind's been blown away just with Brennan Armstrong and NC State, that game for like the last hour. It's cracking me up because there's so many storylines everywhere. But back to the point of the hitting the kicker. I mean, why do that?
Yeah, so to stay with Armstrong for a second here, I would like to see that play again. I saw the play a couple times, and wasn't he being hit while he threw that ball? He didn't throw it like...
Yeah, he was. He was basically getting hit, you would say. But, I mean, the ball just fluttered up. I mean, it literally just fluttered up and right into the hands of the defender. There was no one within like 20 yards, an NC State player, of that ball.
I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I saw it a couple times. I thought he was just being thrown to the ground and just and that altered the throw. Now, to the punter and the punting situation, like you, I think that's an obvious call. You tell your players, instruct them, don't even rush. Just hold at the line, make sure there's not going to be a fake. I wouldn't even rush the punter. And I hate to say that because I love a good blocked punt.
Mm-hmm.
I love rushes on the punter, blocked punts, deflected punts. I love all that. I love that play. However, the risk reward isn't even close. If you have a great punt blocking team, like I believe Notre Dame had last year, they might have blocked 5 or 6 the entire season. And that's just a crazy number. If you block 1 during the season, that's pretty normal. And just the risk of running into the punter or roughing the punter or leaving it up to the official to determine whether you roughed or ran into the punter, it just, with a game on the line, it just makes no sense.
And someone mentioned in private chat, NC State's offense is awful. I try to block the punt too. I understand that, but still, you can't do it because you're going to blow the game potentially, which they got a chance, but still they lost. But it is what it is. Me and you, same page, 100%. Just don't do that. But I did want to bring up one thing about Louisville. If Austin's watching, don't want to upset him or anything, but I was thinking about something. Louisville is not that far away from being 2-3. If you really think about it, Haynes King fumbling late in the 4th. Georgia Tech blows that game. Indiana, the goal line stand, game could have gone to OT. We don't know what would have happened. And then this game here, NC State had chance after chance after chance after chance after chance, didn't do anything with it. I mean, they're literally one possession away every single game from being 2-3. I'm not saying they're bad, but they're probably one of the worst 5-0 teams in the country that you could possibly match. One of the worst undefeated teams in the country.
Yeah. Well, we already know that Indiana does not lose games in overtime. They win all their overtime games. So they're
even against Akron in 4 overtimes.
Absolutely. Even against Akron. So they're unbeatable in overtime. So the Cardinals lucked out there. But yeah, they are 5-0. We'll have to look at their schedule going forward.
It's easy outside of Notre Dame, Kentucky, and there's one other team I forgot who it is. It's pretty good. It's not that hard. They could go 9-3 and be a 6-6 team or 5-7 in the SEC.
We had a discussion on here a couple weeks before the season and looked at Louisville's schedule and looked at that exact point to say this team doesn't play that difficult of a schedule. They miss both Clemson and Florida State.
And did they miss North Carolina too?
Do they miss all 3? I think that's why we tabbed that Louisville schedule as being an opportunity.
I mean, like they could go, 10-2 somehow, and be in the ACC title game. And again, not Louisville. It's just they're probably going to be very, really bad team for the record. 10-2, like if they're happen to be that good as a record, they're not that good of a team by no means. And that's, like I've said a million times about, you're not what your record says you are. It's just never the case. Like, I have nothing against Louisville, and I'm glad for Austin that they keep winning, but their schedule is just they got Duke, but Duke wasn't expected to be that as good as they are right now. But yeah, Notre Dame, Duke, and then they play Kentucky.
Yeah, so they do have Miami.
That's it.
So it's not a cake schedule, but there is opportunity there. They do have to play Notre Dame. Pitt was supposed to be better than they have been. Duke. Wow, we're going to find out a lot about Duke tomorrow night. Then they've got 2 gimmies. They should be gimmies. And although I'm going to predict that one of them won't be. They're both at home. We'll see. Miami on the road, Kentucky. So it's not quite
What's crazy about the schedule, though, is look at the amount of home games there. You've got only 2 road games left at Pitt, at Miami, and the rest of them are all at home. Notre Dame, Duke, Virginia Tech, Virginia, and Kentucky are all at home. That's insane.
So they played a neutral site game against Indiana, and Indiana. Then they're playing no out of conference. Yes, the other non-conference games are at home, so they're only playing 4 road games the whole season.
Crazy. That is insane. That's a good schedule. That's a very good schedule. But yeah, Louisville's set up to do well. They've 8-4-9-3, and again, not saying they're a bad team, but just probably going to be one of the worst teams with a record like that if they end up that good. The other game, Utah-Oregon State tonight, was something else. I mean, Utah is just battered. I mean, their defense is battered. Their offense is battered. I mean, literally all 3 quarterbacks are hurt basically now. Nate Johnson and Bryson Barnes both got banged up in the Oregon State game. They need Cam Rising back, or their season's going to fall apart. And you could just tell they were getting by. You know, like they beat UCLA 14-7. They barely went at Baylor, which is not very good. They're not a good team. They beat Florida at home, yes, but it was week 1. You know, you could just tell that Utah, they need Cam Rising back. Or, you know, they're just going to start losing some games because they had no offense. I mean, DJ Uyunglele threw 200 yards, 204 yards, a touchdown and a pick, and they never were threatened by Utah. It was just kind of sad to see, but that's about all I have to say. Utah needs Cam Rising. And then the BYU-Cincinnati game, interesting stat in the first half was that BYU only ran 20 plays. Cincinnati ran 50. But BYU was up 14-10 at half. That's crazy. Seemed like an Iowa stat or something. BYU ran 20 plays. Cincinnati ran 50.
That's crazy.
I don't even know how it's possible.
There must have been some odd exchange of, usually when that happens, there are turnovers. There's maybe I'm not saying there was a pick 6 in this game, but like Michigan had an exchange with a team like that, and it was because the defense scored, and there were just a few things that happened that allowed the other team's offense just to be on the field basically for 3 consecutive possessions. But 50-20, I haven't come across that.
I don't know how it happened because I was watching more of the Utah Oregon State game. I just flipped it over to BYU Cincinnati, and they showed it on the screen. I was like, wow. I'm sure there's people already behind me, but really quick to get to some of the big games on Saturday, real quick. USC Colorado. I don't know. Basically, with that game, I'm just waiting to see, like, is Colorado going to get land blasted? Are they going to get destroyed again? And is the prime stuff going to settle down a little bit? Because, like, literally on FS1 for the Utah-Oregon State game, because I watched the majority of that game, the entire time they were talking about Big Noon Kickoff and USC Colorado, and it's all prime. Like, it's no Caleb Williams, it's no Lincoln Riley, it's still prime. And again, I have no issue with that. I like prime a lot. Deion Sanders, nothing wrong with that situation at all. It's a great story, but it's like they're hurting Colorado right now. The media, well, like you mentioned about how, you know, you were in the field, you know, and all that, and the way media is today, it's everything's skewed to death. But I mean, like, they're hurting Colorado. They keep talking about them. And if they get destroyed again, it's just not going to look good. And like every single person is probably going to turn on them, except obviously Colorado fans themselves. Not the bandwagon fans are going to drop off. And just, to me, it's just doing this to them when they're a 21.5-point underdog against a team that can put up 60 on them if they wanted to. It's just not good to me. I just think that they need to settle down a little bit, just a little bit.
Well, in situations like this, I wonder how much is the media responding to the Colorado hype and what people want to see, what the public wants to see, versus how much of what the public is buying into has been spurred on by the media pushing Colorado down our throats. I think it works in a cycle. I would have to say that the media is always going to be attracted by clicks and views, and that's what they get into. Of course, they're running a business, so
which is fair.
Just understand that, regardless of, they're not going to show necessarily the best game. Most of the time, the best game is also the most viewed game. That those things go hand in hand. But sometimes we've got a situation like we do here, and Fox is not going to choose. Look at the schedule of college football and say, what is the best game, the best matchup we can show at noon for our highlighted featured game? No, they're showing the one that most people are going to watch.
Which I get. I mean, Colorado State had 9.5 million viewers.
Yeah.
That game should never have cracked that. Like, if Deion wasn't there, that game would have had less than 1 million probably, or barely over 1 million.
Yeah, let's say, that time slot, I think, averages about 1.5 million. And that's with better Pac-12 teams usually in that spot. If that's the typical Colorado State game, and we won't even go to last year's 1-11. Let's say it's a typical like 5-win Colorado team and a middling Colorado State team. You know, that game's going to do about barely 1 million.
mean, Auburn Cal didn't get that many, nowhere near as many at the same time slot. It was crazy. It just cracked me up. But yeah, an interesting thing when me and Will did our picks this week for the games, I picked 4 teams that I don't trust right now to go on the road and get a win, but I picked them all. I picked Florida to beat Kentucky on the road. I picked Clemson to beat Syracuse on the road. I picked LSU to beat Ole Miss on the road, and I picked Notre Dame to beat Duke on the road. And I'm like, why did I do that? I have no idea. But for whatever reason, I'm going with all 4. And obviously, I'm picking Bama to beat Mississippi State. That's not as far-fetched. But those other 4, those are good games, all 4 of them. But I could see them all 4 going either way. Because, I mean, Syracuse in the Dome is good. They're really good. And Clemson is really, really struggling right now. But they're way more talented. I mean, on paper, they should win. But it doesn't mean that they will. Florida, I mean, Kentucky's undefeated. It's at home. And Florida is wishy-washy. And they played the game of their life against Tennessee. But, again, can they do it again on the road now against Kentucky? LSU, Ole Miss. I mean, LSU barely beat Arkansas last week. Ole Miss kind of got slightly destroyed against Bama. That's kind of tough. And then Notre Dame loses the heartbreaker to Ohio State. Are they going to bounce back and play harder and then come back and beat Duke, or is Duke the way that they've been playing? Are they going to be able to beat Notre Dame like they beat Clemson? I know I just rattled off those 4 games. It's kind of hard for you to make a point on any of them, but what are your thoughts on all 4 of those games really quick?
Well, Duke and Notre Dame, our handicapper guy says that Duke is actually in his math models, basically a pick'em game or a 1-point pick in that game. And wow, I really don't see it. I hope it's an exciting game. And I think Duke certainly has it in them, as they showed against Clemson, to play a 4-quarter game against Notre Dame. But I do think that Notre Dame is a legit top 10 team in the country, and Duke is more like a top 25 team in the country. Well, on a given night, especially playing at home with enough adrenaline and they make things happen, turnovers, all those things, Duke can win the game, but I don't expect it. I think it's going to be worth watching, though. If I could only watch one game tomorrow, that's the game I would watch. LSU and Ole Miss. Ole Miss's offense hasn't really shown me much. And I know Alabama's defense, I think, is really, really good. And people are missing that with all the quarterback issues and the issues trying to get this offense generated. I think they finally figured out some things with Jalen Milroe last week, what they can do with him, what he's going to do best, which is pretty obvious, but more of how do we call a game plan with him, play to his strengths. And after Ole Miss scored an early touchdown, so I know that I didn't see any of I watched quite a bit of Bama Ole Miss. I didn't see any LSU Arkansas. And so I don't know how that came to be. Although KJ Jefferson, I think, is arguably the best quarterback in the league. So, but for that to happen in Death Valley when I thought LSU was probably the best team in the division, I do like LSU to go into Ole Miss. What else? What other games did he bring up?
Clemson, Syracuse, and Florida, Kentucky. I picked Clemson and Florida, all 4 road teams.
Syracuse hasn't played anyone, but they have played a couple decent teams. They did go to Purdue and win sizably. It was close most of the way, and then they broadened it out. They were in a tussle with Army, of course, last week. They scored 26 consecutive points in that game. They held Army to negative rushing yards in the second half. They held them to like 4 first downs. They are putting down some defensive efforts every week. They're like in the top 5 in the nation in defense right now. It's a difficult place to play for whatever reason. It's not necessarily going to be loud or packed at the Carrier Dome. But yeah, this is a whole psychological deal with Clemson, because if they can do math, they know they're almost toast in the ACC. Like, it is really out of their hands. They need Duke or
Mm-hmm.
Duke to lose 3 games or North Carolina to lose 2, and I don't know if the 2 teams are playing. They just need all sorts of different things to happen for them to get to a championship game that, wow, I don't know how they'll take that, because even though they had this kind of year 2 years ago when they lost 3 games, they weren't out of it until really late in the season. And now they're basically out of it. And I don't know how this team's going to handle that.
Mm-hmm.
I thought Klubnik played a good game last week, and I thought they played so well for most of the game against Florida State.
Florida State does not look like a top 5 team in the last 2 weeks. That the game they played, they have not even barely like a top 25 team, especially in the BC game. I mean, that it was awful, and then they turned it around against Clemson. But yeah, I mean,
yeah, I'm willing to give Florida State a bit of a pass against Boston College, but Boston College hasn't played another game. Like, it's hard for me to believe. I know it's psychological, and I know that there are these emotional highs and lows and letdowns. That's all true. But Boston College can't, they're completely inept against everyone else. And they played that well against.
They lost to Northern Illinois, and they barely beat Holy Cross.
Yeah,
like they're not even in the same league.
They gave up 56 points to that Louisville offense that we saw tonight.
That barely beat Indiana, who barely beat Akron in 4 overtimes.
So this just goes to show us, like you say all the time, it's hard to judge and evaluate these teams from week to week. I do think that the Florida State's a top 10 team, and I know Clemson is out of it and everybody's down on Clemson, but I think that I was watching one of the 15 or 20 best teams in the country last week. I don't know what their record's going to look like at the end of the year. And I do think that Florida State's I think they're more like a lower end top 10 team is who they are.
I agree with that. The last game was Florida-Kentucky. I picked Florida as well, and I'm really nervous about this one because of the fact Kentucky is undefeated. Like I said, they're at home, and they're favored by 1 right there on the screen. But I picked Florida. I don't know if that was a bad pick or not. I don't know if any of them are, but that's the one I'm the most concerned with.
Florida played a really strong game against Tennessee. If you really look at that, that was not like this game that was going back and forth that they pulled out. They had control of that game. They really shut down Tennessee's offense in that game. Trevor Etienne had a huge game against Tennessee, like 172 yards rushing. This is a team that's one of the few teams in America that's played 2 quality teams. I know you're not high on Utah, and they're not a typical Utah team, but they're obviously a top 30 or 40 team in the country, and Kentucky's played no one. And Devin Leary's not off to a good start. He's thrown 5 picks. But I do have a little faith in Kentucky in this one. But I think that line is very telling of the even quality of these 2 teams.
Yeah, I would agree with that. They're both mid-tier SEC teams. Florida being more talented, obviously, it has the potential to be better if they play like they did against Tennessee. But yeah, I like I said, sure, there's people behind me, but last couple points, real quick. Indiana, I respect the fact so much that you have them at number 11. Thank you on your power rankings, because they have not been the worst team in the Big Ten, despite the Akron game. That I thought Tom Allen was gone. Hey, Tom Allen flashed before my eyes. I thought it was over. I thought he was fired. I mean, he probably wouldn't even have been fired if he lost, but it felt that bad, But the way they play against Louisville, the way they play against Ohio State, I don't think that they are. Now, they play Maryland tomorrow or today. I'm not confident in that game at all. They're probably going to lose. I picked them to lose by about 7-10. I forgot what I said.
Yeah, I think they'll cover. I think they will with the points. I didn't pick that game. It's not one of my picks, but I looked at that spread and thought, well, I would tend to take Indiana with the points.
I think they'll bounce back and play better. They probably won't win, but like I said, I think that they will cover and play better. I don't know if they'll make a bowl. I still think 4 or 5 wins, but yeah. And then you had North Carolina at number 2, which it was insane to see that. It was nice. At least since Indiana's not having a good season so far, North Carolina's doing great. Home state team, Drake May, he's thrown 4 picks. The defense has been better. The offense is doing really good. So that's been fun to see. And when you just had Clemson at 7, that was funny too. You're like you said that Clemson usually, if they're 7 in the country, it's not that good, but they're 7th in the ACC. I mean, it was just I like your power rankings on the Big Ten and the ACC. Everyone check those out. Those were really good videos.
Well, I appreciate it. I would like to get to all the conferences. I just kind of ran out of time, but yeah,
that happens to me all the time. It stinks because there's so much stuff I want to talk about, and then it's like, oh man, I'm out of time. I can't talk about it. It's already here. It happens all the time. Sports just moves way too quick, but you do a great job covering as much as you possibly can. And I've always say every time, like and subscribe to the Voice of College Football, everybody. Mark works harder than almost anybody I've ever seen in my life, but I can't wait for the games tomorrow. I've probably run enough on the games that I talked about, but there's a lot of sneaky games, not a lot of headliners, even though they want you to think USC Colorado is. I don't see it being that game unless Colorado throws a rabbit out of their hat and plays excellent football. But a lot of sneaky games. I'm looking forward to it tomorrow, and hopefully Indiana at least covers. And Bama
we
wins.
appreciate you calling, Jeffrey.
I appreciate you having me on, and it was a good night of Friday football, and I can't wait for tomorrow. Thanks for having me on.
Our guy Jeffrey leading us off tonight here at the Voice of College Football. A little late night talk with Oregon State picking up a big win against Utah. That's the most important result. Well, hey, Louisville 5-0. How about that? Survives NC State. And as Jeffrey alluded to there, man, we got 15 team channels here, and they keep me busy. And I'm doing my best to delegate on those channels and get some more people involved and carry those, and we would provide a much better array and menu of content here on the main channel is what I'm looking at. And we got to those power rankings for the ACC and the Big Ten this week. I would like to release power rankings for all 5 conferences. I released a video a couple hours ago that should have been done days ago because I knew that it wouldn't play too well on a Friday, but still wanted to get out there since I had done a little research on the Big Ten West division. Looking at this year's results, last year's results, what the results have been in the 9 years that there has been a Big Ten Western Division. So check that out, Big Ten fans, especially a bad showing again by the Big Ten Western Division this season. All right, let's go back to the lines. We got DeReal MVP on the line.
Hey, Mark, how you doing this evening?
I am doing well. What's going on?
I'm very disappointed in only Talk Sports. Picking Florida over Kentucky. What can you say, Mark? I mean, sometimes people just disappoint you in life, and man, you're going against the team with the better coach, better quarterback, and they're on the road.
Better coach, better quarterback, at home, better quarterback. You know what? I'm going to keep that comment in mind while I watch that game tomorrow night because I believe that will be my number one choice. Prime time, and I think that's debatable. I think that's up in the air.
For this year, I would agree with you, but if you look at their entire careers, I don't think it's debatable.
No,
I think
not debatable. No, not over their careers. I agree.
And I mean, you look at the yards per attempt, the way they're throwing the football. Devin Leary's chucking it down the field. Gray Mertz is just doing a bunch of dink and dunk passes. I mean, if the goal is to have the best completion percentage, then Kentucky's going to lose the football game. But that's not how way football's played. You need to score points. And I just don't see Florida being able to get into the end zone against Kentucky. I mean, they could barely get into the end zone against Charlotte. They just struggle to finish in the red zone, Mark. And it's going to be these little things that I think determine the outcome. And Kentucky's special teams this year, Mark, have been really good. I mean, really good. So that could also be the outcome.
Well, we're dealing with a lot of knowns for this time of year with Florida and a lot of unknowns with Kentucky. But I like the point spread, I think, tells us everything we need to know. I just think that this game's a coin flip. And much like you, I trust Mark Stoops. I trust Devin Leary more. Not that I have just in just complete trust in him, but in comparison between the two quarterbacks. And then I want to see Kentucky and how much better their offensive line is, and they're playing at home, and I think that makes a difference, even though in this series I don't know that it's necessarily made a difference. I do think that the crowd's going to be hyped up knowing that they're going to go to 5-0 if they win this game.
Oh yeah, and Kentucky will be ranked, which I know doesn't matter to you because you don't believe in the rankings, but for little old Kentucky over here, having that number beside your name matters a whole lot. And in 2021,
rankings.
Right. And in 2021, I don't know if you remember that game, but Florida had like 8 false starts in that game.
Yeah.
I mean,
I do remember them having issues, and that was at Kentucky, of course, is the reason you're pointing that out. Yes, I do remember the false start issue with Florida, which, of course, that was 2 years after. Was it the 2018 game that Kyle Trask emerged? Felipe Franks got hurt.
No, that was 2021. This game occurred.
2021?
Yeah, 2020 was the COVID year. Kentucky had a bunch of COVID injuries, and Florida won like 63-3 or something silly like that.
Wait a minute. Trask didn't play in 21.
No, he didn't. 2021 was the false start game.
Yeah, I'm talking about the Kyle Trask relieving Felipe Franks.
Oh, I think that was 2018. I think you're right. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. So did their every other year format, did that get screwed up by the COVID year?
No, I don't think so, because 2020 was at Florida, 2021 Kentucky, 2022 Florida. So
all right. Yeah, there have been some wild games in the last like 6 or 7 outings in that game. Kentucky could have won a couple of other games, as you well know. Some bad things happened late in the game, a few times in the swamp. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this game. I have not really seen Kentucky play at all this year for good reason. And I did see the Florida-Tennessee game, most of it.
Well, I can understand why you haven't seen any of Kentucky, but
I think seen one play.
I can understand. But we actually throw the football down the field. It's weird. Like, Kentucky's running game is a bit suspect this year, but our passing game is okay. It's the complete inverse of what you normally would expect for Kentucky. And Kentucky has this bad habit of they'll get like no yards on first down, but on second down they'll get like 20 yards, or they'll go 3 and out. There's no middle ground for Kentucky of going 3 yards, 4 yards, 4 yards, sustaining a drive. It's weird. It's very un-Kentucky-like, Mark.
Yeah, that is. You would think Ray Davis would give them a little bit more stability that way.
Yeah, but he's got that explosive factor. I mean,
gotcha.
It's weird. Every player on Kentucky feels like an explosive player and not a consistent player. I'll tell you this, Dane Key, Kentucky's wide receiver freshman that had an elite start last year, very disappointing, basically been on a milk carton. He had 1 touchdown pass about Vanderbilt, and that's all I can remember him doing. I mean, I would like to see him get at least a few early catches because he's just been in a sophomore slump, man. It's been disappointing to watch. But outside of that game, Mark, I've got to talk of you about the Louisville-NC State game. There was plenty of passes in this game. You're just scratching your head thinking, what are they looking at? I mean, Brandon Armstrong threw it completely over the middle by like 15 yards and threw an interception. Jack Plummer just threw it up in the air and threw an interception. Both were in the red zone. I'm hearing some NC State fans saying Brandon Armstrong needs to be benched, and they put in their freshman quarterback, MJ Moore, I believe his name is. So what do you think about that?
Yeah. Well, we've seen MJ Morris play, and he's a pretty good quarterback. Plus, he's a better athlete than Brendan Armstrong, who can run. He is a threat on the ground, Armstrong, but he's not the athlete that MJ Morris is. MJ Morris, the year that Devin Leary got hurt last year, played quite a bit, and I was fairly impressed with him. And so that is a good thought right there. I think we've seen enough of Brendan Armstrong struggle. It's been a season in 4 or 5 games, and I don't necessarily know what's going on with him. And he's reunited with his former offensive coordinator. People thought that would be the right tonic for him, but he's not playing well. And I know that there are other causes there, but it's mostly him. It is mostly him from what I've seen. And I'm a big Brennan Armstrong fan. I thought watching him in 21 was fun. Him throwing for 450 a game and keeping Virginia in games that they shouldn't have been in, and he just kind of did everything. But I don't know what's happened to him. He was never like some NFL projected starter, so he was never that kind of passer. But maybe defenses have just gotten the book on him, and yeah, he just hasn't looked good. Yeah, MJ Morris would be the guy to go to.
Okay, and I know Jeffrey was talking about Louisville could be not as good as their record is, but I mean, shoot, if you're a Louisville fan, year one under Jeff Brom, you go 9-3, 8-4, 10-2. I mean, to me, that's a successful season. Outside of the playoffs, and when you get to the nitty gritty of it all, does it real? I know who your record are is. Your record doesn't indicate how great you are, but it determines what bowl game you normally get into and stuff, Mark. So, how important is your record when determining the success of your season?
Well, Jeffrey made a good point, and we made the same point, like I said, before the season started, about Louisville being a possibility to kind of break through because they don't see Florida State or Clemson, and I don't believe North Carolina. But their schedule's still legit. You know, they've got Notre Dame coming up next. They've got, well, I expected Pitt to be a much better team, and then they've got your Kentucky Wildcats, and they've got one other difficult game in there, Duke. So they're going to have to clear some hurdles. But this is a tremendous season for Jeff Brom, and Louisville was very fortunate. Fortunate that Jeff Brom, that he wants to come back to his alma mater, and I'm sure that he wanted that for quite some time. And they have just upgraded at head coach, I think, pretty significantly. And I think Jack Plummer's not a great quarterback, but he's making the throws, and I can't really analyze what he did tonight, but before tonight, he was playing really well. And he will, Jeff Brom will run the type of offense that will allow him to make easy throws, not put too much on him. Not that he's not going to throw the ball a lot, but Jeff Brom worked with him at Purdue, so they know each other, and I'm sure that's a big factor, obviously, in Plummer going to Louisville. I think it's a great situation, and I think that Louisville's, based on what we know of their NIL capabilities, is possibly a team on the rise.
I mean, I would agree with that, and something I would also note is I think all those teams you mentioned, except for Duke, is outside the ACC, so Louisville could legitimately be 8-4, but 6-2 in the ACC.
Yeah, that's a good point. MJ Morris, I know that I saw some of this last year. These are decent outings against Virginia Tech. He went 20 for 29 for 265 and 3 touchdowns, no picks. Wake Forest, 18 of 28 for 210, 3 touchdowns, no picks. And then not a great game against BC, but 12 of 24, 135, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. He completed 61% of his passes, 7 touchdowns, and 1 pick.
Sounds better than what they're getting from Brandon Armstrong right now.
It is.
There was plenty of times, Mark, if you watch that, you could tell exactly when Brandon Armstrong just gave up on the play. Like, he was just going to run the ball no matter what. It's weird. I don't know if there was like some mental issues he's having, or he has an injury he's told to can re-aggravate it or something. I just don't understand. He's completely fallen off the map.
Yeah, and again, like I mentioned, I know that he was never some hot NFL prospect, but maybe something's also happened with his arm strength. He's got a pretty weak, this is like watching Peyton Manning his last half a season with the Broncos. Like, he's fluttering a lot of and I'm not even talking about the interception because he was hit on that play. He's not drilling the ball downfield.
Agree, Mark. It's a weird situation. That's all I got for you, Mark. Fight on to the only undefeated conference left in America, the Pac-12.
I'm looking forward to those DeReal send-offs more and more now that he has taken on the challenge of the fight on, that he lost the bet, whatever that bet was with the USC guys. And he lost some kind of wager with the USC folks. And so then he has to end the conversation with the fight on. I don't know how long that goes on, when that's going to end. But now we get DeReal MVP having some fun with it. Congratulations, Connor. Your Oregon State Beavers, a winner tonight against Utah. Dominant defensive performance, helped out by some, let's say, questionable quarterback play from first Nate Johnson, who was benched after halftime. We know that Nate Johnson coming into this season is a prospect that Utah is really high on long term, but didn't want him playing. So even though Cam Rising went down, they still were looking at Bryson Barnes and looking at can't think of the other guy's name. It starts with a B as well. Bryson Barnes and the other quarterback who came into the Rose Bowl and threw a touchdown pass against Ohio State 2 years ago. That Nate Johnson was supposed to be a package player, bring him in, run the Wildcat, let him run around. But they went with him tonight, and it was not pretty. And then they brought in Bryson Barnes in the second half, who got the ball moving between the 20s a little bit, sustained some drives, but not good enough to pull through against the Oregon State defense, which I got to think this is a very proud team that coming off that Washington State effort, they wanted to prove a point. All right. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. We've got our guy Sean on the line.
Hey, Mark, how's it going?
It's going pretty well. How are you?
Wish I was doing better. I'm watching my Bearcats play about the most frustrating game of football I've ever watched in my life. I mean, it's very close.
Well, I see BYU is knocking on the door right now.
They just put it in.
They just put it in.
Yep. Cincinnati is down by 15. They should be up by about 21 right now.
Okay, explain this to us.
Okay. Pick six. That's how BYU got their first touchdown. The pick six where Cincinnati was methodically moving the ball down the field. First down, Emory Jones, I think, threw it intentionally to a BYU defender who had nothing but green grass, 70 yards of green grass in front of him.
Well, Sean, not to interrupt you, but if Emory Jones is throwing passes to BYU intentionally, maybe we should look into that.
It was a suspicious moment right there. I mean, I don't know. But it was obviously that's in jest, but a very, very, very bad pick six. At one point in the first half, Cincinnati had 250 yards of offense and BYU had 32. And the game was tied.
Wow.
At 7. They just, every single spot, every single inflection point, they're just screwing up in some way. And right now, the BYU's offense showed absolutely no pulse through the first 29 minutes. None. They were flatlining, dead. And 3 straight drives, they cut right through them like Swiss cheese. They scored a touchdown with 48. They got the ball back with 48 seconds left, went right down the field at the end to make it a 14-10 game. Cincinnati dominating every statistical category. Jeffrey said it was 50 plays to 20 plays. I mean, it was thorough domination by Cincinnati in the first half, and they were down 14-10.
Yeah, that is one of the starkest stat lines I've ever heard, and I'm into like unusual, strange stats. I find them interesting, and that's a box score right there to behold. Yeah,
Cincinnati still outgained them by about 150 yards in this game, still at this point, and they're down 15. This has been maybe the most frustrating team to follow and root for every game. They gave that Miami game away totally. Two turnovers in the red zone. They against Miami, they had 8 trips into the red zone and finished the game regulation with 23 points. Last week against Oklahoma, they had about the best 6-point offensive performance you'll ever see. I mean, like, very good ball control. They moved it efficiently. Just whenever it mattered, nothing. I don't know. I mean, it's obnoxious. They're a very annoying team to watch, and it would be one thing. They were picked near the bottom at 13th or 14th by everyone in the Big 12 this year, because I think just a lot of people thought they didn't have the players. That's not the problem right now. I mean, they physically can match up with everyone. And oh, by the way, when they just forced a 3-and-out the last drive, they muffed the punt and gave the ball at the 15-yard line to BYU too. So yeah, it's an obnoxious night, but to root for them. But hey, I was here supporting the Bearcats when times were good, and stick through to them when it's rough here.
Did you grow up in Cincinnati?
I was born in Dayton, Ohio. Okay. My grandfather played at the University of Cincinnati.
Oh, nice.
So I was so I was a Bearcat fan, all the way up growing up, and it took a long time. I'm 35, so the first several years they weren't very good until I guess like the Brian Kelly years, and then they really took off. But yeah, so I mean that is what they are. So
yeah, they just showed the numbers again. The play count is 70-37 Cincinnati, and the time of possession's 32-16. Yeah.
This is quite pathetic, and I don't know. I mean, every they've been a team this year. Momentum like just kills them. When things go wrong, things go really wrong for them. Like, it's just an avalanche.
Oh. So yeah, they just suffered a sack for that was a long sack too, about a 15-yard loss.
Yeah.
Sean, you're also an Ohio State fan, right?
Absolutely.
Yes. Who do you root for when Cincinnati plays Ohio State?
Okay, so it's usually Ohio State, just because Ohio State has much more to play for when they play each other. So it's like a Cincinnati loss would be devastating to Ohio State, and Cincinnati's usually like that's expected. But like if they ever played in for a national championship, I would be pulling for the Bearcats in that situation. Yeah. Okay. So so that's that, and punt, and I'm close to flipping the channel here because this shows no signs of turning around at all at this point. Okay, moving on to something more hopeful. This weekend's slate here, not a particularly great one. I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of interested to see just what Michigan's offense does against Nebraska. Like, I don't know. I mean, Michigan's been just sort of, I mean, their offense has been, I don't know. I mean, just kind of effective enough in all these games. Like, you don't have, I'm not blown away by anything they're doing, but it's like they're never threatened. So it's like, I mean, are they just being a little complacent in these? And I mean, that might be the same this week because Nebraska has no offense. And they probably won't.
There's being complacent, and then there's being complacent when you've got a 24-point lead in the fourth quarter. I don't expect Michigan to start this game complacent. Like, I think the crowd, it being a Big Ten road game, the name Nebraska, even though they're smart enough to know and read the numbers and the scores and know that Nebraska is probably not that good, I think that they'll take them seriously. Shoot, they blew them out 34-3 last year, and Nebraska's quarterback situation was something similar to what it is now. I look at this game, and what hits me is the same thing that hit me with the Iowa-Penn State game when I first looked at that, and I just thought, how is Iowa going to move the ball against Penn State? And Nebraska's got a pretty formidable running game with Anthony Grant. Now, they've lost Ramir Johnson and Gabe Ervin, so they had a pretty decent three-headed monster back there, and now it's pretty much up to Grant and a couple freshmen behind him. But I still look at Nebraska and just think, how are they going to score in this game?
Turnovers, block punt.
Those kind of. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, it's really been like remarkable. They scored 7 points against Colorado, and Colorado can't.
Oh, they scored 14.
Colorado can't defend a runny nose right now. I mean, the whole West. I mean, God, have you ever seen a Power 5 division this weak? Ever?
Well, you can go to some years in the ACC Coastal.
Yeah, sure.
That are pretty awful.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, I don't
won the ACC Coastal and lost 7 games.
Well, I'm sorry. Who?
Pitt in 2018 won the ACC Coastal and finished 7-7.
Wow.
Virginia lost 5 games and won the Coastal the year before. The year after.
7-7. Wow. I didn't realize they were that average. I remember Wisconsin winning the the Legends division? Was it the Leaders division, wherever it was? And
technically won it. They finished in 3rd place. Yeah.
3rd place, yeah. And won it because the top 2 teams weren't eligible.
Yes.
And then managed to run a 70 burger in the championship game somehow.
Yeah, that was pretty incredible.
Yeah.
And because they lost the Rose Bowl, they finished 8-6. The Big Ten champion was 8-6 that year. That Pitt team, you talk about statistics, looking at the game we're talking about and statistical anomalies. This was just kind of a butt-kicking kind of statistic. Kenny Pickett only threw for like 7 yards in the ACC championship game against Clemson.
Kenny Pickett was the quarterback in that game?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, he replaced the starter at the end of 2017 and played the last game for Pitt in the regular season. They didn't make a bowl game, and he pulled off a win against 10-0 Miami. And then he went into the next season as a starter, and they won a bad ACC Coastal Division.
Yep.
And, Miami had the distinction, the dubious distinction of not winning the Coastal 3 consecutive years, but they always beat the team that won the Coastal, which kind of showed that they probably should have won the Coastal, but they blew a bunch of other games. And they beat that Pitt team 24-3. The last game of the season, but Pitt went to the ACC championship game.
There was something like ridiculous. Like, wasn't it like 5 straight years a different team represented the Coastal?
No, it's more ridiculous than that, Sean. 7 years in a row. All the teams in the Coastal took a different season. They ran through the entire. Duke won it in 13. Florida State in 14. No, it'll take me a while to go through it.
Well, that's very agrarian of them. I mean, that's a heck of a
Yeah, they went through all 7. Duke 13, Georgia Tech 14, North Carolina 15, Virginia Tech 16, 17 would have been. Who am I missing?
Miami did play
17. Yeah, there you go. And then
Miami and then Pitt, Virginia.
19 was Virginia. So they completed all 7 years between 13 and 19. All 7 teams won it. Yep.
That's absolutely bananas. Like, what would be the chances of that ever happening? I mean, that's got to be like hitting a Powerball or something.
Yeah. Well, if you look at the other divisions, you just can't imagine Rutgers winning the Big Ten East, Vanderbilt winning the SEC East.
No, absolutely not. I mean, you've got a bad division if that ever happens. I mean, geez, but the West this year, and I saw this in the offseason, I'm like, is there any team that's any better than they were last year? And there's some that I thought would be significantly worse.
Yeah.
Like
Purdue, Illinois.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like the writing was on the wall. And I'm like, okay, I mean, is there any reason to have hope for Wisconsin this year? And
Sean, you know who's better, but it doesn't matter. Northwestern's
Northwestern, better. Yeah. They've won a game on the continent this year.
Yeah, they won a Big Ten game. They won 2 games on the continent.
Yeah.
And they won a Big Ten game.
Yeah. So
yeah, Northwestern's better, and they'll probably go 3-9.
Yeah, Northwestern. They've got the Big Ten version of what am I trying? JT Daniels, their 4th team in 4 years for Ben Bryant.
Yes,
that quarterback. Yeah, so I'm very familiar with him. Obviously, being a Cincinnati fan. Not a great quarterback, but Northwestern's not a great team. So, all right. So moving down, the Kentucky-Florida game. Is there any real reason to get excited about this game at all? Because I mean, I saw that
your motivation is. Well, if your motivation is just to watch a close game, I anticipate this being a nail biter. Okay. But if your motivation is that one of these teams is going to contend for like a conference championship, probably not.
Okay, where's that game being played?
Lexington.
All right. Should be rocking for that one, huh?
Yeah, should be.
Yeah. Absolutely. So yeah, that's is that really like the top game at night? I heard you talking to Darrell earlier saying.
I was not looking at the schedule when I said that, but I remember earlier this week I kind of ran down what games I would watch when. Let's see. At roughly 7 o'clock, the primetime schedule is, here we go. Well, at 6 o'clock, you've got LSU and Ole Miss. Yeah. That's a comparable game. Although LSU is probably playing for more than any of those other 3 teams. I don't consider any of these other games, Oklahoma, Iowa State, Oregon, Stanford. Ugh. Yeah. Then this is the game. Okay.
Yeah.
Notre Dame and Duke. I want to see Notre Dame and Duke play. So my viewing at 7:30 is going to be Notre Dame Duke number 1, and it's going to be Kentucky Florida 2, and then it's going to be South Carolina Tennessee 3. And if one of those becomes a blowout, then I'll get interested in maybe Iowa Michigan State, even though that could be a terrible game to watch.
That will likely be a terrible game to watch.
But I'm into terrible football. That's fine.
Well, whatever the under is in that game, 36.5.
Our betting guy, Steve Merrill, gave us a ridiculous statistic that he said that so the over-under on that game is, 36.5. That 37 is a key figure in football because the obvious, 24-13, 20-17, etc., the number of games that can land on 37, that when the over-under is under 37, this almost seems incredible.
Yeah.
That the under has come in 25 of the last 26 times. You would think it would be the exact opposite, that the under would be so low, the over-under would be so low that most of the time, there would be some scoring, something has to happen.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, it's not as egregious, but when the over under is like over 70 or 75, that the great majority, like over 80% of the time, it goes over.
No, absolutely. It's like these outlier moments right here.
Yeah.
Vegas, like the algorithms don't know how to, the models don't know really how to exactly.
Yeah, they tend to go back to the median. Yeah.
Median. Like, okay, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that under total is fascinating to me because I remember hearing something like the under had hit in the Army Navy game something like 19 straight years. It was something insane. Like no one ever scored above 17 whenever they played each other, and it was so.
Yeah, these Iowa games have been living like in the 35 to 38 over under range.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it is really hard to model for total outliers, and Iowa is a total outlier team. I mean, they're great defensively, and awful would probably be generous to say.
Yes,
offensively, and that brings an interesting point here. I mean, were we a little too hard on Spencer Petras? I mean, like he had an extra year of eligibility, and he just stayed on to be like a grad assistant at Iowa, right? Because I think probably had no options because everyone thought this guy's like the worst quarterback that ever existed. Are they better with Cade McNamara? Has McNamara been better than Petras?
No.
I
still think he is, but he hasn't been. You're right. And I brought that up during our Iowa show with Corey Brada. I said, you know what? I said, Cade McNamara is playing like Spencer Petras. He's basically putting up like numbers. And then I thought about it and said, is he even putting up as good a numbers as Spencer Petras? And we kind of dove into it, and you could imagine what Spencer Petras's roller coaster kind of career looked like. We looked at, he'd have a decent game. He'd have a 15 for 22 game for 200 yards and a couple touchdown passes. Then he'd have like just a 9 for 24 for 111 yards and 3 interceptions. But yeah, McNamara's coming off 5 for whatever he went, 5 for 14 for 42 yards or whatever it was. And even going into the game, he was hitting like 54% of his passes.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problems at Iowa are more fundamental than anyone is really willing to acknowledge there.
Yes.
Like there's a lot of talk about fire Brian Ferentz. And I agree. He shouldn't be the offensive coordinator there. He's proved himself incapable of the task. But I mean, this has been a building problem for a long time at Iowa. There's something fundamental about the program that has led to this moment where they're completely moribund here. I mean, they're completely ineffective, ineffectual. And I mean, like, if Tom Brady, from college, or, if any great quarterback you can think of, if Andrew Luck from 2009 came back and quarterbacked this offense, how good would they be?
Well, you wonder what they would do. What would they do if Caleb Williams was there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, it's just there's something fundamental about the way they approach the game right now.
Yeah,
that is just holding everything back.
It doesn't work.
It just doesn't
work in any way. You would think with the level of player that they typically have, and of course, I'm not selling them as a bunch of 5 stars, but and before he got hurt, Luke Lachey, one of the best tight ends in the game, and so forth and so on, the pieces that they have on offense, and now with a quarterback who has led albeit a run-oriented team to a Big Ten championship game and had a nice season. I've made this statement a number of times on our Iowa show. You could almost just you could almost just run dive right, dive left, and then a play action pass, or just pick plays out of a hat and produce more yardage in games than they do. It's just unfathomable how awful they are.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just they have not adjusted to the modern game in any way, shape, or form. And I mean, we're seeing an era where a lot of power teams are having great success. You know, a lot of teams they're reverting back to more traditional I formation and ace, 21 and 22 personnels. They're doing just fine. In fact,
that makes it even more ludicrous, Sean. And again, this is another statement I made during the summer when we were trying to project whether this offense would be any better. And I said, if you took the teams that are ranking in that same bottom 5 in the country with Iowa, whoever they are, UMass, New Mexico State, whoever, if you went to one of their press conferences with their coach and said, Coach, you rank 129th in the nation in total offense, and kind of outlined, you've not been able to do X, Y, and Z. Is this acceptable? Or, just phrased a question. They would flat out tell you it's not acceptable. We need to get better. We need to do better. We're going to work on X, Y, and Z. When Kirk Ferentz is asked that question or posed with that issue, his response is always, it doesn't matter as long as we win.
Yeah.
Like seriously, you have the they're 131 right now in total offense. And it's not like they've played a murderer's row other than Penn State.
And I can understand him being a little bit short with the media on answers like that, because he knows where that line of questioning leads to. And, that's not a road he wants to go down, And I mean, it is a shame because he's been so good for that university. He's produced such a good program for such a long time. And I mean, the longer this continues, I mean, just the more he stains his legacy and tarnishes what he's done. I mean, honestly, Iowa should be one of the bottom programs in the Big Ten when you really look at it.
Is he tarnishing, though? So for people that care and know that it could be better, I understand what you're saying. But overall, in terms of his record and his national legacy, I don't know that he's tarnishing it that much. They have a weak enough schedule. They could go 9-3 or 10-2 with this level of production of course, they're going to have to do better than they did against Penn State. If they don't score, they're not going to win a game. But they're of course going to be able to move the ball better against lesser defenses. But they could be just as atrocious as they've been this season and in the past few years, and win 9 or 10 games with that schedule.
Yeah, but there will still always be this idea that for the last 5 years, this will resonate in Iowa fans' memory banks. I think that for the last 5 or 6 years of his tenure, assuming it will end pretty soon, he just dug his foot in the ground and defended his son and dragged the program and down with him while they were, and then they had these laughably bad. They put this laughably awful, unwatchable product out on the field.
And of course, Sean, what's going to happen next year, unless he decides to step away and sees not the writing on the wall, like anything's going to be done to dismiss him, but if he sees the writing on the wall that this conference is going to become decidedly tougher a year from now. Yeah. So you bring in 4 programs that have a huge talent advantage long term, and you bring those in, and based on whatever schedule dynamic they come up with, whatever format it is, they're going to have to play 2 or 3 of those 4 every year. So their schedule difficulty is just going to be ratcheted up.
And I'll add even another thing. Wisconsin and Nebraska, I think this is the time to get them. I mean, I think you look at them and they've got really competent head coaches with long proven track records of building excellent programs. They're not going to be the Wisconsin and Nebraska of 2023.
No.
Going forward.
I agree.
So, I mean, like this conference is just going to get ridiculously tough. And Iowa can't keep playing 2005 football and expect to stay with it at all. I want to one last point, because I've taken up a lot of time. I appreciate your patience with everything. Notre Dame, how difficult does it have to be to get up for this game against Duke's? A fantastic team. They are coming off what clearly, I mean, I haven't heard a lot of Notre Dame fans even talk about Duke this week. I don't know how much that is bleeding into the program, but I mean, that is, I mean, we saw how they came off of the game last year. the big, huge spot, and it was bad. It was really ugly. They can lose by 30 points if they put that product.
Yeah, they're going to be playing a much better team than they did coming off the Ohio State game.
Yeah. So
well, I'll say this: I do think that these student athletes are resilient. I think they're more resilient than maybe I would be. When you think about all the work that they put into a game, or just put into the entire season, just lifting weights, working out, running, doing all the things, the film sessions, the meetings all year, it's a job. And then you come within, and you have all this pressure and expectation placed on you, and you come within one play of getting to the mountaintop, and you lose, and then you keep hearing, well, Notre Dame can't do this, can't do that. And you might be like, well, I'm a sophomore here. I wasn't around for all that. And all this is being heaped on me. And then you got to turn around and play this game 7 days later at Duke. But I do think that these athletes are pretty resilient emotionally.
Yeah. I mean, like, they weren't last year, though. I mean, like that's the interesting crux. I mean, they showed up, and it barely showed up. Their bodies showed up to play Marshall that day. I'm not sure if they brought their minds or their spirits or anything else that day. I mean, like, very interesting, because I think Notre Dame on paper is a top 10. I mean, like, from what I've seen this year, this is a top 10-ish team.
Yeah.
I'm not sure Duke really is at bottom. They had a fantastic showing one night this year, and they're a much better program than we expect. And I mean, I imagine that place will be as hostile as what's it called, Wallace Wade Stadium?
Yes,
can possibly be. With the whatever 30,000, 35,000 fans can fit into there.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, that's a huge test. And if Notre Dame really shows up to and really takes care of business, wins that game by a couple of scores, this is a real team, and you know they have a good chance of running the table. If they can really show that tomorrow, because this is emotionally, I think, an incredibly difficult spot.
Yeah, it is.
All right, thanks, Mark. Great talk.
All right, John, thanks for the call. Appreciate it. We are looking at Cade McNamara's numbers right there this season. He had a decent game against Utah State, and they came right out of the gate with 2 scoring drives right out of the opening kickoff of the season. Then look at this. Iowa State, 12 of 22 for $123. Now, if you show these to a lot of Iowa fans, they wouldn't really blink. But you show this to any other fan base where they have quarterback play, that even for just decent quarterbacks across college football. In today's game, they complete 65% of their passes. They throw for 250, 280 yards in a game and throw a couple touchdown passes. And their TD to pick ratios are usually 4-1, 5-1 these days. Cade McNamara at 4-3, completing just over 50% of his passes. And the last 2 weeks, he's 14 for 33. He's 26 for 55 the last 3 weeks. Illini Cast is asking me why Illinois is ranked dead last in my power rankings in the Big Ten. Well, this is an easy explanation, but Illini Cast, excuse me. I appreciate the comment there. Normally love your power rankings. Okay. Illinois played a MAC team in week 1. And I know that it's a good MAC team, one projected to win the conference, Toledo, but still, they're a 10-point favorite at home, and they needed a 4th down conversion to set up a game-winning field goal to beat Toledo. All right. And then they played Kansas, and they got trucked. The final score was 34-23, but if you watch that game, they gave up 523 yards of total offense. They were never in the game. They were down 34-7. They had some smoke and mirrors. Maybe they could get on the fringe of a comeback. No, not really. They got killed at Kansas. Killed. I know Kansas is a good team, but still, this is Illinois playing at Kansas. This should be a competitive game. Then they play Penn State. Okay, Penn State's one of the best teams in the country. True. So they pretty much did what you would expect an Illinois team would do against Penn State. They lost by 3 scores at home. And that being said, they were not supposed to lose by that much according to the Vegas line. So they didn't even cover the Vegas line against Penn State. They lost by 17. It could have been worse than that. It was 30-13. They scored a late touchdown, meaningless. They were down 30-7. And then they played FAU this last week. FAU. They should win that game. Any team in the Big Ten that's decent, that is not the worst team in the Big Ten, which right now I'm basically saying that they've played like the worst team in the Big Ten because they have. Anybody in the Big Ten should beat FAU by 3 scores. And they were down 10-0. They won the game 23-17. It was an ugly, ugly game. They're an ugly, atrocious 2-2 team right now. All right. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. We've got our guy Michael on the line.
Hey, Mark. How you doing tonight, sir?
I am doing well. How are you?
Not bad. Just relaxing during my lunch break here at work.
Very good.
Okay, I got to say, I caught bits and pieces, but DJ Ugalele, how good did he look tonight? I seen that he threw a nice touchdown pass earlier.
How good did he look?
Yeah.
Not very. He was okay. He was better than the Utah 2 quarterbacks. They were both awful.
I take it Rising didn't play tonight?
Cam Rising did not play. They started Nate Johnson, and he got benched at halftime. And they brought in Bryson Barnes, who had been playing, and he fared a little bit better. But
okay.
So DJ was the best quarterback on the field, but that wasn't saying much tonight.
Yeah. I'm going through. I see that was a nice win for Louisville tonight, too.
Yeah.
My question is, they're 5-0 right now. I'm thinking they can get 10 wins, but they got 3 tough games coming up soon with Duke, Miami, and Notre Dame. Could those be wins or lot? How do you think they'll do in those 3 games, you think?
Notre Dame, Pitt, and Duke?
No, Notre Dame, Duke, and Miami.
Oh, you're looking at the entire schedule, assuming they're going to win the rest of the games, the other games.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Which they should against Virginia Tech, Virginia, and Pitt.
They should. They should. They'll be looking out for that Pitt game. I would say, I don't have it in front of me, whether we did have their schedule up. Let me pull it up here real quick. we did look at this. So Louisville's schedule. All right, I want to see where these games are. So they've got Notre Dame at home. I would say that they've got a 30 or 35% chance of winning that game. Notre Dame's a better team than Louisville, a fairly significantly better team. But they've got a shot. They've got a good shot. They're going to have a night game against Notre Dame. This Duke game, they've got that game at home. I think they've got better than a coin flip against Duke. We're going to know a lot more about Duke at this time tomorrow night. And then the Miami game. Miami's had one game against State. What's been impressive about Miami thus far is they have just really manhandled the teams that a Miami team should manhandle, that they have not been able to dominate in years. So for them to beat Miami of Ohio by 5 touchdowns, for them to club Temple by 34 points, even though they should do that to those teams, they haven't done that in forever. And I watched them take apart Texas A&M. That was an impressive game. So Louisville's going to have a rough time going to Miami and winning that game. It's possible they can win the game, but I only give them maybe a 20-25% chance of winning that game.
Yeah, but what's the chances there are going to be more Louisville fans here than Miami at the game?
What are the chances? Next to none.
Yeah, I just want to seem like they can never get fans to get in there for some reason.
Yeah, but they don't get the other fans in either. They just don't have anyone there. But the people that are there are mostly Miami fans.
Yeah, I gotta ask you this. I seen you had Illinois 14th, Purdue 13th. How close was Purdue to being 14th in the Big Ten?
Well, Purdue has played better against capable teams. They've played well against a good Fresno State team. They've played pretty well against a Syracuse team until late in the game. They beat a Power 5 team on the road, and I know Virginia Tech's not good at all, but they still went to Blacksburg and won. Illinois has not done any of those things.
Yeah, so pretty much whoever loses tomorrow, they're going to flip spots most likely next week.
Oh yes, they're going to be in the basement. Whoever loses that game,
but
unless Indiana loses 52-0, maybe
who they got tomorrow?
Crazy like that.
Who's that you got tomorrow?
They play Maryland.
Or what about Northwestern?
Northwestern's got Penn State.
So they'll lose tomorrow most of the.
Yeah.
But no, I was just trying to figure out. I asked you last night, and I didn't know if you had a chance to do this or not. So, but did you ever find the chance when I asked you, a team that lost all their home games but won all their road games? I didn't know if you had
Michael, I did not stay up all night looking for teams that won all of their road games and lost all of their home games. That's what we put in the category of a waste of time.
Well, I mean, sometimes you gotta have you have a little free time. That's what I was just trying to figure out and stuff like that. So
that's not what I'm going to be doing with my free time.
Well, I know, but hey, I'm sure it's happened, hasn't it?
I don't think so. Anybody in the chat, what Michael is asking is there a team that has ever won every road game and lost every home game in a season?
Or vice versa?
Oh, won every home game and lost every road game? Now, that's possibly happened. That I would bet over the course of history has happened.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering. Jeffrey asked me why LSU was talking about me or something like that. No, I was just wondering stuff like that. No, so I see that Cincinnati, BYU getting ready to put the finishing touches on Cincinnati.
Yeah, this was a really strange game because in the first half, as our guy Jeffrey let us know, Cincinnati ran 50 plays and BYU ran 20. And even as of just a couple minutes ago, Cincinnati had run 70 plays to 37 and still had about 150 more yards in total offense.
Yeah, but didn't they throw a pick six too?
Yes.
I thought so because I seen some there was in there pick six and stuff. That's what I was trying to figure out. No, I was wondering stuff like that. Well, I gotta get back going. I know there's a couple more other people. I will catch you tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow night, sir.
Thank you, Michael. I
See ya.
appreciate it. Have a good
Yep.
night.
You too. Bye.
Cincinnati just scored to get within 35-26, but there's only 26 seconds left, so we will await the onside kick. Of course, Cincinnati has amassed 498 yards of total offense, 498 to BYU's 296. So basically 500 to 300 total offense. All right. We did have a call, but they've given up on us. Amazon links in the description section of all the videos, folks. Also, keep in mind that we, of course, have our Patreon offering and also our YouTube membership. And so the deal is you don't need both of them. Just one of them gives you the same benefits. So either subscribe right here and become a member on the YouTube channel. Any of the tiers, grab a YouTube membership here on the main channel, or patreon.com/MarkRogersTV. You get my picks, 15-5 against the spread. They're out there. They're released. My predictions for this weekend. 15-5 against the spread last weekend, 51-32 for the season. And of course, Steve Merrill from Wager Talk gives us an exclusive under the radar selection each week. It's all documented. Not making this up. I am not making this up. 16-1 against the spread. Gives us one selection each week. 16-1 against the spread. And then you get the Discord link where you can talk college football with the knuckleheads here 24/7, 365 all the time. Keep in mind that we've got post-game shows all over the place tomorrow. So Nebraska, Michigan, Iowa, USC, Oregon, West Virginia, Oklahoma, Texas, Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, Clemson, Notre Dame, all those teams we've got post-game on their team channels or right here on the main channel. And then, of course, you know what I'm going to do is I will pick out 2 games at noon. I will watch them and provide instant analysis. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching the instant analysis videos. They have done extremely well. So thank you. And then I will do the same thing. It's difficult to do it at 3:30, though, because, man, what happens is, and let's check out the onside kick. Oh, we're done. All right. BYU wins over Cincinnati. What happens is I watch 2 games at noon, and then I do instant analysis. And by the time those 2 games are over and I do the instant analysis, cut the video, do all the things that need to be done, do the thumbnails, upload the videos, it's pushing halftime of the 3:30 games, and it's kind of hard for me to catch up with the analysis on the 3:30 games, but we will attempt to do the same to give you 2 instant analysis of the noon Eastern time games, 2 instant analysis of the 3:30 games, and then, depending on how it goes during the primetime window, the same for the primetime window. And then, of course, we meet here at approximately, depending on how the games are going, approximately 11:30 Eastern time for the big call-in show. So we would invite you all back on Saturday night, again, for the big call-in show. Thank you, Jeffrey. Instant analysis on Kentucky and Florida. What always puts me behind on those 2 is it's inevitable that out of the 2 noon games, one of them ends at like 3:05, 3:10. It's a quick running game, or it's a blowout, so I don't need to watch it till the last second because it's 41-14. like I did LSU, and I had one of the stranger viewership, and I'm sure none of you care about this, but it's 2:00 in the morning, so I start to talk about what I want to talk about. I had one of the stranger viewership responses to a video a couple weeks ago. LSU and Mississippi State played, and I thought that was going to be a really good game. It turned out to be a horrendous game, but I did watch it along with another game. And so I did an LSU Mississippi State instant analysis, and it got like the worst response of any video on my channel in years. And I've had some clunkers. Believe me, the last couple of videos I've posted, nobody cared about. They were a complete waste of my time. Nobody watched my ACC power rankings or a couple other videos I did recently. So when I post a video and I get like 300 views, that's like, okay, this was a waste of time. However, so I post this LSU Mississippi State instant analysis, and 6-8 hours later, 10 hours later that night, there was like 40 views on this video. I couldn't believe it. I was like, what? And so there's like 40 views on this video. And at the same time, I forget who else played at noon. I can't remember. Oh, shoot. Anyway, what other game was the big game at noon? I did instant analysis, and it performed like it typically does. And what was strange was I noticed like later the next day, it's like Sunday night, and I look at this LSU Mississippi State because I'm just looking at my various videos, and I see that it's got like 4,000 views. And I'm like, where did that come from? Like, nobody was watching this. Why are people watching this instant analysis of this noon game from the day before on Saturday and watching this on a Sunday night and Monday? Yeah, that popped up with 5,100 views. Yeah, I did Penn State, Illinois at the same time. And Jeffrey, thank you for watching my ACC power rankings. Nobody, we either have like very not loyal ACC fans. Yeah, we just the last 3 videos I posted, my goodness, the last 4 videos, and I knew that the video that I posted today, videos don't do well on Fridays. I think people have they've dived in on enough analysis at that point that they've just thought, you know what, the games are tomorrow. But I had these numbers and I had already taken all these notes. So, but you guys like this Lou Holtz Ryan Day video? I may actually do a response video to that because we got 310 comments, even though it's a really stupid topic. But people are into stupid. All right. We were going to hang him up for the night, but we got Connor Johnson checking in.
Let's go.
It's a nice effort tonight.
Yeah. Top 10 Beavs.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know what to tell you. Because you know what my response is going to be. My response is going to be, I don't care what the national rankings are, and I can't answer whether I will rank them in the top 10 here. I don't know. I'll have to look it over.
Utah is a good win. A lot of people were saying without Cam, but without Cam, they beat Florida. They beat Baylor handily, and we absolutely dominated them tonight.
They beat Baylor handily. They escaped that game. They were losing.
The Florida win is a good win, though. So I think after last week losing to Wazoo, this is a must win, and we needed to respond. If we're going to be a playoff team, at least Pac-12 contender, then we needed to come back with this.
Yes, I'm not asking you to apologize for defeating Utah. That is always a good win. Yes.
Yeah, I think. I mean, especially with where we are. this was a must-win. You couldn't go back-to-back losing and still think you're going to make the Pac-12 championship game. So
I was mildly surprised that you lost to Washington State.
I was too. I don't know if it was that I thought we would be better and I thought they would be worse. They were obviously better. Cam Ward, I think, should be talked about in the Heisman talks more so than he is. Win against Wisconsin or against Oregon State. They play UCLA next week. So we'll see. It just goes to show how deep the pack is, I think. But Washington State, Oregon State, homeless right now. I think we're probably in the top half, definitely. But you could say we have the most impressive, probably like second and third most impressive wins so far in the pack.
Yes. Now, I have not been following or tried to follow the realignment situation or any current talk. Is there anything out there in terms of these two schools finding a home?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're hopeful because we finally have some leverage with the Pac-12 litigation going on. But also, if you look at the CFP talks, they're basically on hold because Kirk Schultz is on the board. And so what that means is they can't vote to change the future CFP model. And so if we have the 2 years given to us to maintain Power 5 status, we basically have an auto bid, us and Wazoo, the next 2 years into the playoffs. And so if you look at the money that we could be making from the CFP the next 2 years, that throws a wrench into things definitely. And so you'd think it would behoove the other power conferences to get us into a power conference. That way they could split that money. Otherwise, that's hundreds of millions of dollars coming Beavs Wazoo way the next 2 years. So we're hopeful. It sucks that we have to back our way into this because you watch that game tonight. Obviously, I'm biased, but in my opinion, that's a Power 5 stadium, football team, staff, athletes. Utah thought they would handle us with just by being better. And so nothing to take away against Utah. I mean, we built their program similarly to what they did. Smith respects Witt a ton. I just think if you're a Big 12 fan watching this, there's no reason to think. So correct me if I'm wrong, but Utah in the future Big 12 was the favorites. And we dominated Utah from start to finish. So why don't we belong? It's just
sad. To me, Utah is going to immediately be the best program in the Big 12.
Yeah, and so we proved that we were a better program tonight. I mean, you could say Rising, he is what he is, but I don't think they would have beaten us with Rising. And I was hopeful he would play.
I don't think so either. It certainly would have been interesting to see. He's a big loss for them, and their first half quarterback Nate Johnson was pretty lost. Now
Bryson Barnes started to have a comeback in the second half.
Yeah,
the pig farmer. I wish he would. I think he got injured again, and that's why Nate Johnson came back in the game. But to say that they would be able to come back in the game is just a testament to our defense, and we still are a top defense in the Pac-12. I mean, albeit we didn't show it last week against Wazoo. I think that has more to do with Cam Ward and what they have going on than our defense. So we're still a top 3 defense in the pack, I would say. And that makes up for our lack of offense, especially because DJ, he's hit or miss and he's hit a lot of good throws, but, he's thrown some picks. We do have, though, the ability to throw down the field this year, which we didn't have last year with the quarterback. And DJ is accurate down the field on a lot of his balls. Sometimes he overthrows it, but tonight Utah's defense is very good. So if we can run the ball like we did against them and then play action every once in a while, I think that's the model going forward.
Ron Lowney has left a comment in the chat, and this is what I was going to respond to a few minutes ago concerning how good Oregon State is. So, as you well know, if it was all about football, there would be no question. Oregon State would have gotten the nod over Arizona State, and others. But it's about determining, okay, what is this program going to give us in terms of TV revenue?
Yeah, I think I don't think people realize that Wazoo did better numbers than the entire Big 12 just last year alone. I also think Oregon State is middle of the road Pac-12 in viewers. So the viewership answer doesn't really tell me what I need to know. It's almost like we have leprosy. I think it has more to do with being in a remote location out here in the Pacific Northwest than it does viewership numbers, because like I said, Wazoo kills it in their numbers. And when Oregon State is good, we've proven to do well in our numbers. So I don't think that that's the full story.
Yeah, I was about to pull up some TV numbers as we talked there. Who's on deck?
We'll see how we. Next week we got Cal at home, so should be. Actually, I think it's away. But yeah, that should be an easy win. Wazoo plays UCLA. Yeah, so there we are. At the middle of the.
So
at
this
the bottom
is
of the
last week. So last week would have been the last
we were
week.
The next highest Pac-12 game.
Last week was a tough week. A lot of big games, and you guys played at 7
Wazoo,
Eastern.
Yeah. We had to go against the Notre Dame Ohio State game. So with that in context, I think that's a very respectable number. That's a Power 5 number right there. And we're both, left alone. So,
well, Texas Baylor was a bad game, and it did 2.6 million. Arkansas LSU on ESPN did 2.44 at the same time slot. Iowa Penn State played at the same time at 2.75. And so, yeah, that was the rundown.
We're still the second highest Pac-12 game. Colorado was higher. That was at a different time. USC was. But I think right now we are either the second or third highest in viewership numbers. We had a game against San Jose State, which was on a Sunday, so nobody else was playing, and so that helped a lot. But you can't. I don't know. I mean, I'm biased, but the viewership number, that's not the problem. It's being this far out here, and the Big 12 wants to wait for the ACC to fall apart, which I don't blame them. You could get Pitt, you could get Louisville. So they're going to wait for that. It's about us forcing ourselves into the conversation, and that's the other power conferences realizing there's all this money to be had if we're not a power conference. And because the bylaws grant us 2 years as two teams, we're still the Pac-12. So, I mean, the next 2 years, it should be a given that at least one of us makes it between 2 years. I don't know if we make it both years, but the amount of money that we could split making it 1 year is hundreds of millions of dollars. So,
well, if I was on the Oregon State side and I was making a case, I would also bring to light that this program's only been good for 2 or 3 years now. And the TV ratings typically reflect staying power as well. So as the football program continues to excel, those TV ratings are going to continue to rise as people become more and more aware that this is a top 15 or 25, football program.
Yeah, definitely. Because it's only our second year of really being ranked. We're still at the beginning of that. But if you were to extrapolate out and really, if you're a ball nut or if you're a sicko like we are, you would see that Jonathan Smith led programs. There's no reason to doubt that we will remain in the top 25 with the level of talent that we bring in and the development that we have proven. I mean, we went from the worst Power 5 program just 5 years ago to being we've been in the top 25 all season, preseason included. Last season, we were in the top 25 for half the year. I know we don't care about rankings, but that is what the national viewer is seeing. So we've reached the point where we're expected to be in the top 25. And with the new stadium, if you saw the game tonight, the orange out, and they highlighted the new stadium a little bit, but to put the resources into the new stadium, into the coaching staff, into recruiting, we've proven that we can play at a Power 5 level, Power 4 level.
Yeah, my basic knock against the rankings, to be clear, is it's not as though I don't think that there's any relevance or any validity to them. If you're the number 8 team in the country and there's been 10 games played, you're obviously, whether you should be 8 or 6 or 9, you're obviously, you've done something to prove yourself. If you're 10 games into the season and you're 9-1, then you deserve to be ranked somewhere high. I just bring to light that there's nothing magical about being number 25 versus being one of the other 10 or 12 or 15 teams in the country that have a very similar resume. And we just have this cutoff point that you're ranked, you're not ranked, and they could be pretty much the same football team.
We're reaching the point where I think we're a top 15 program, no matter the players. So if you just take the coaching staff, the weight conditioning staff, and we're playing in a very tough Pac-12 the past 2 years. So we're 1-1 right now. I mean, obviously the Wazoo loss hurts, but Utah, the 2-time defending champions, and I think Wazoo is being slept on right now. I think they'll continue to surprise with Cam Ward. But let's be real. The Pac-12 still isn't nationally respected. So if the Beavs are going to make the playoffs, we have to win out. We already had our loss. That means we have to beat at Oregon. We have to beat Washington at home. We have to beat UCLA at home. We have to go to Colorado. We have to go to Arizona. And I know those games aren't the best, but Colorado's proving something, and Arizona has an offense. So if the Beavs can make it through this schedule, I think already we've solidified a top 15, a program to be wary about. But we still have a lot to go, and I'm hopeful, and I'm a little nervous because obviously the Pac-12 is so deep. But DJ is doing just enough, and I hope he continues to do just enough. Our defense has proven to be top 3 in the pack, so that's got me excited.
I, by the way, Connor, have not slept on Washington State. I've got them number 4 in the country.
Yeah, rightfully so. I mean, as far as Heisman talks go, like obviously there's Caleb. Bo is doing well. Penix, who I thought was going to be the favorite to win the Heisman this year.
Yep.
So after those 3, I mean, maybe you could put Ward above Bo, and then you still have Shador. You still have DJ isn't maybe playing at the best right now, but who's to say that he can't put it on the last half of the season? And then Caleb still hasn't, or not Caleb, Cam Rising still hasn't played yet. Dante Moore, UCLA, we could see maybe something out of him. So the Heisman race is just ridiculous.
Yeah, it is. It's a fun conference. It's going to be the best race. Now, while the Big 12 has more competitive balance from 2 to whatever in terms of good teams, quality teams at the top, it's the best, and I anticipate it to be the best race in college
As
football.
for the Big 12, would you say that if Oregon State were in the Big 12 next year, that we're the odds-on favorite to win?
Well, I'd have to weigh personnel gains and losses and all of that. But that
But as far as
aside,
coaching staffs, I mean, is there a better coaching staff than Utah and Oregon State
no,
in the Big 12?
no.
So that's what I'm saying. I don't understand why we don't have value. Albeit we're in the middle of nowhere, and albeit that we don't draw the best viewership numbers. You pointed out how a new team to this kind of level isn't going to draw the best viewership numbers. So if you extrapolate out a couple more years, a few more years with the Big 12, you could see Jonathan Smith and company being a stalwart in that conference. It makes me. I'm pissed, but like, I'm also confused. Like, we're a small college town, but you should also value that in the Big 12. I get they're waiting for the ACC, but also Brett Yormark said that the Pacific time zone was a key goal that he was trying to reach.
Yeah. And if the viewership numbers are reasonable, let's call them reasonable. They're not great, they're not horrible, they're decent. That you wouldn't necessarily care that particular TV market isn't the source of those viewers. They're coming from a more regional or national audience. And they're not coming from like because Washington's in Seattle that's bringing a large draw, let's say for Washington in particular. I don't see that connection.
But you also have like the Seattle market. Washington State absolutely kills it, gets 1.5 million on average on a week-to-week basis, depending or not dependent on who they play. And Oregon State, we split the Portland market the same way that Washington State splits the Washington market with Washington. I think you could see the Big 12 adds Oregon State and Washington State with the ESPN pro rata, which is about 20 million a year. So then that leaves the other 11 mil that the other Big 12 are getting, and that's from Fox. And so you have to look at the Civil War and the Apple Cup because Washington and Oregon are obviously in the Big 10. But if we can continue that rivalry in the non-con, then you could see maybe Fox paying to have Oregon State and Washington State just for that game alone. Maybe not the full 11 million pro rata, but those two games on their own are two of the top West Coast games a year. So I'm not, gonna go all out and say that we're gonna get the full 30, 31 mil, but you could see it. I wonder how long we can hold out. And I think we've hired a consultant to say that we can schedule independent for the next year, 2 years. that were granted the A5 status, but at some point, the CFP is going to have to make a decision, and that's where we're holding those talks up. So we can stall. That's that's some leverage, is just stalling, and
Stall and win.
stall and win. Yes, sir. And we didn't have anything going for us just a month ago, 2 months ago. But especially if we win this lawsuit coming up, then we also have all of the assets in the Pac-12, liquid assets, money from basketball tourney units and TV revenue from the Pac-12 network, and then the network alone is an asset that you could leverage to get us across the finish line. So we have like 5 different angles going for us to get to a power conference.
Mm-hmm.
None of them are going to get across the finish line. None of them are very strong. But if you combine all of them, the CFP, the assets, Pacific time zone, we're doing well on the field. You could see us getting into the Power 4, I guess it'll be. But the CFP would rather only pay 4 conferences than 5, and the 2-pack, we're holding firm out here, going to stall until we can't trust anybody. We're left to do this. We can't trust the other 10 PAC members. They're trying to steal or split the rest of the assets with us. The other conferences, the networks, have deemed us unworthy, and so we're just going to play and win. And the eyeballs and like the social media presence, like people are starting to catch on to these 2 leftover programs who've been absolutely shafted by the networks, by the Pac-12, by the other conferences, by the CFP. And that's kind of fun, like if you're a casual, or if you are a college football fan without a team to cheer for Oregon State and Washington State, because we're freaking good and we're homeless, and we're anti-greed. We're anti what college football has become. So let's go.
Okay, the only thing I would say to that, Connor, is you've become that out of necessity.
Yeah, but also like the Pac-12, the West Coast in general, we're the only 2 true college football towns, and the SEC lives off of college football towns, and the SEC is the best conference. So if you're disregarding what college football stands for, and we stand for that on the West Coast, that's not right. I mean, the Big Ten has stayed together for 100 years because the Ohio States of the world aren't above taking more money than like the programs that don't really make much money. And we seemingly have forgotten that. And we've forgotten, but we're being reminded that Oregon State and Washington States of the world can still take down the Wisconsins of the world 2 years in a row. Like, let's not forget, like Wazoo has asserted their dominance over a top half team in the Big Ten. I don't know where Wisconsin lands in the Big Ten, but they're certainly a top half team, and Wazoo has all but dominated in their 2 matchups. Oregon State, we proved we belonged last year. Yeah, we lost to Wazoo, but that didn't stop us from going out and beating a perennial top 10 program, top 10 coach in Kyle Whittingham. I mean, we out-schemed, out-coached. It doesn't matter they were missing Cam Rising. They wouldn't have won with him, in my opinion, tonight.
Yeah. Well, certainly all credit goes to Washington State for winning those 2 games against Wisconsin, but I wouldn't make a narrative out of that. It is 2 football games. And
But
and,
it's
and I
a
wouldn't say
narrative
that
when
they
the
didn't
Pac-2
dominate.
is left.
They didn't dominate the games. They won the games.
I think it's a narrative when the Pac-2 is left unattended for, when we're just left out to dry. So when Washington State and Oregon State would be competitive in the top half of both the Big Ten, Big 12, who are the only 2 conferences we have a chance in, and we would compete to win the ACC. It leaves a feeling as a casual college football fan, bias aside, it has to ask the question, why? I don't have an answer for that. Like I said earlier, it's like we have leprosy.
It's strictly financial.
There was
an
analysis done by Navigate College Football. They do consulting. We were valued at $23 million a year. So ESPN right now could pay pro rata for us to join the Big 12 at $20 million a year. Let's say that both us and Wazoo are at that mid-20s mark. If we're playing good and we have national eyeballs, that mid-20s mark should be plenty to get us into the Big 12, because we're only going to garner more eyeballs the further we continue to play at a top 25, top 15, I think top 10 level. Let's be real. Let's just list out the top 10 teams, and Oregon State and Washington State are right on that bubble. Like, if we truly care about the product on the field, and if we're taking eyeballs into account, which we're doing eyeballs, why aren't we a power conference football team?
Because those other teams are still drawing significantly more eyeballs. And to your credit, Oregon State, especially Oregon State, but also Washington State, are drawing more eyeballs, or as many as a lot of schools that have safe harbor security in their conferences, but they're already there. They already exist. They already have history, whether you want to say Indiana, Illinois, a number of those kind of schools.
Yeah.
But they're already there.
No, I don't disagree. It makes you think, like, if we could just reset this all, we're certainly worth $50 million, which is what we asked for. But if you look at Colorado specifically, who was the third team to leave after the LA schools, how much would Colorado be making in an Apple subscriptions model? So the Apple subs model was a base of 25 million. But the numbers that they're doing, if you were to attribute that to subscriptions, they could be pulling in Big Ten, SEC type of numbers.
Sure.
And
yeah,
woulda, coulda, shoulda, but like.
But who would want to bank on a situation that rests solely on the euphoria surrounding a new head coach?
Well, that's why I ultimately blame all of what happened to the Pac on ESPN and Fox, because I think they run a duopoly, and they could ultimately both agree to not pay us, to strip us of our best teams and to spread them evenly. And there you go. You only have to pay one less conference. We kind of backed into this whole Pac-2 CFP money kind of thing. We got lucky, but so they may not get away with it. But most of the time, ESPN and Fox are going to get away with what they did. And that is a larger sign to the state of where we are. I mean, they're like our government who pulls the strings. They're the puppet masters behind the scenes. And then they let the people bicker between themselves. They let Republicans and Democrats blame it on each other. ESPN and Fox, they were able to pull the strings behind the demise of the Pac-12, and they're getting away with it because we're bickering. Oh yeah, the Pac-12 thought they were worth 50 mil, and so they shouldn't have ever asked for it. That was stupid. But we live in a world where Disney Corp owns ESPN and Fox. The two of them can work together to have a better benefit for the both of them. Ultimately, that was for a worse benefit of the Pac-12.
Yes, it's quite the scenario, and we hope Oregon State and Washington State land on their feet. Connor, we appreciate you being here. We've been here forever.
Can we
What?
I'm gonna get off my soapbox. I feel like I've led this show astray. I don't want to pull away from the exciting games we got going on.
No, we have certainly run those down. So we are in a good place. We've been on forever.
Oh, okay.
So Connor, we appreciate you being here and calling the show.
Yeah.
Have a good night.
USC pulling away from Colorado tomorrow.
For those folks that get my predictions, they know.
Oh yeah.
All right, Connor. Appreciate you
Mark.
being here. Have a good night.
Likewise.
Michigan Man Moose, thank you so much for putting the link in the chat. We've got our merchandise there. And please grab the link in the chat. You see all the fine merchandise that we provide here at the Voice of College Football. You get your Discord link, plus you get my picks, plus you get Steve Merrill's Under the Radar selection, whether that be as a Patreon member or at the Voice of College Football. The membership's on the front page of the channel right here. So grab yourself a YouTube membership here on the main channel, and you get my picks. You will see them as soon as you sign up, and you will get Steve Merrill's Under the Radar selection, 16-1 against the spread. You got about 70 people on Patreon and about 40 members on YouTube can verify that. He just keeps knocking them dead every week. So I'm kind of proud of my 15-5 last week against the spread, but it pales into comparison to Steve's Under the Radar selection that you get exclusively here at the Voice of College Football. Ferris, sorry, we are not West Coast. Actually, I'm about as West Coast friendly as anybody I know out there because I keep West Coast hours, even though I'm on the East Coast or in the Eastern time zone, that I'm still around at 2:30 in the morning. Roger Dodger, thank you so much for that. LBC Robbie, everybody else commenting, thank you so much for all of that. We appreciate you being here. Again, I'm going to deliver instant analysis of the big games in each time window tomorrow. Maybe we'll jump on live at some point if a lot's going on or there's some kind of big upset story. Otherwise, we will be here late night on Saturday night. So we had about 100 people in tonight. Friday night's not always a great night, but we would love to have more like what we used to do. 500, 600, 700, something like that tomorrow. So bring a friend, bring 2, bring 5, bring 20, blast it out on social media. Let people know that we are here and we will be here after all the big games on Saturday night. John, thank you so much for dropping the link to Patreon. And again, we do our best to provide the same exact benefits as a Patreon member and as a YouTube member because the Patreon thing's been going on for 3 or 4 years. So we didn't want to drop that and the 70 plus people we have there. So when the YouTube membership started, I just thought, okay, we need to match what we've got on Patreon on YouTube. So you don't need both unless you want to support us on both. Oh, I need to get to these super chats. My apologies. I missed these. Here we go. We've got Domer Wop So we had posted this earlier. Notre Dame Nation appreciates you, John. This is for John Kennedy over on Always Irish. Domer Wop coming back with conflating Mark and John. Oops, too much rusty. Well, we appreciate you too, Mark. Thank you, Domer Wop. Appreciate that. Thank you so much for following up with the super chat. I had no issue with you saying you appreciate John, but thank you so much for that. And we got John Teal. Attention on Prime takes pressure off the players. Colorado and USC. Keep this in mind. They're going to kick off at 10 a.m. 10 a.m. local time, and consider that for USC, that's mighty early. That's 9 a.m. for their body clock. And the Colorado has already played 2 of these games for the big noon kickoff, one in Dallas-Fort Worth and one in Boulder against Nebraska. Slap Happy, thank you so much for the super sticker. Appreciate you. Again, get your YouTube membership right here or go to patreon.com/MarkRogersTV right here at the Voice of College Football. We will see you all throughout the day on Saturday. Enjoy the games.